Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well out there. Yesterday, we read a book about Laura Ingalls Wilder and how she traveled west in a covered wagon with her family to settle in land that was available for European settlers to start a new life and start farming. The cities back east, like New York City, were becoming very crowded, and a lot of people who lived there had to work factory jobs. So many people decided that they would try to head west in a covered wagon and create a new life, create a farming life. And they built their own houses and sometimes even built houses underground called sod houses. But one thing, even in Little House on the Prairie, that Laura and Mary and her family discovered was that the land belonged to the Native Americans. And the Kansas Territory hadn't really yet been deemed open for settlement by European settlers heading west. The land still belonged to the Native Americans. I have a story that's one of my favorites that I'm going to read to you today about the prairie or plains Native Americans and their way of life before European settlers headed west and changed the way that they lived forever. So the book that we're going to read today is called The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses. And this was written and illustrated by Paul Goebel. And his illustrations are beautiful. So I recommend all of his books. He tells beautiful stories of Native Americans throughout the United States, different tribes. This one happens to be about the Plains Native Americans that we study a lot in our classroom because we live in Kansas. We live in the Great Plains. I also want to point out that this won a Caldecott Medal, which we talk about a lot as a very prestigious award because your pictures or illustrations are so beautiful. So Paul Goebel won this award for this book, The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses. The people were always moving from place to place, following the herds of buffalo. They had many horses to carry their teepees and all of their belongings. They trained the fastest horses to hunt buffalo. There was a girl at the village who loved horses. She would often get up at daybreak when the birds were singing about the rising sun, and she led the horses to drink at the river. She spoke softly, and they followed her. People noticed that she understood horses in a special way. She knew which grass they liked best and where to find them shelter from the winter blizzards. If a horse was hurt, she looked after it. Every day, when she had helped her mother carry water and collect firewood, she would run off to be with the horses. She stayed with them in the meadows, but she was careful never to go beyond sight of her home. One day, when the sun was overhead, she started to feel sleepy. So she spread her blanket out and lay down. It was nice to hear the horses eating and moving slowly among the flowers, and soon she fell asleep. A faint rumble of distant thunder did not awaken her. Angry clouds began to roll out across the sky, with lightning flashing in the darkness beneath. But the fresh breeze and the scent of rain made her sleep soundly. Suddenly, there was a flash of lightning, a crash and a rumbling which shook the earth. The girl leapt to her feet in fright. Everything was awake. Horses were rearing up on their hind legs and snorting in terror. She grabbed a horse's mane and jumped on his back. In an instant, the herd was galloping away like the wind. She called the horses to stop, but her voice was lost in the thunder. Nothing could stop them. She hugged her horse's neck with her fingers twisted into its mane. She clung on, afraid of falling under the drumming hooves. The horses galloped faster and faster, pursued by the thunder and lightning. They swept like a brown flood across the hills and through the valleys. Fear drove them on, leaving their familiar grazing grounds far behind. At last, the storm disappeared over the horizon, and the tired horses slowed and then stopped and rested. Stars came out, and the moon shone over the hills. They were hills the girls had never seen before. She knew she was lost. The next morning she was awakened by a loud neighing, and a beautiful spotted stallion was prancing to and fro in front of her, stamping his hooves and shaking his mane. He was strong and proud and more handsome than any horse she had ever dreamed of. He told her that he was the leader of all the wild horses who roamed the hills. He welcomed her to live with them. She was glad, and all her horses lifted their heads and neighed joyfully, happy to be free with wild horses. The people searched everywhere for the girl and the vanished horses, but they were nowhere to be found. A year later, 2 hunters rode into the hills where the wild horses lived. When they climbed a hill and looked over the top, they saw the wild horses led by the beautiful spotted stallion, and beside him rode the girl, leading a colt. They called out to her, and she waved back, but the stallion quickly drove her away with all of his horses. The hunters galloped home and told what they had seen. The men mounted their fastest horses and set out at once. It was a long chase. The stallion defended the girl and the colt, and he circled round and round them, so that the riders could not get near. They tried to catch him with ropes, but he dodged them. He had no fear. His eyes shone like cold stars. He snorted, and his hooves struck as fast as lightning. The riders admired his courage. They might have never caught the girl, except her horse stumbled and she fell. She was glad to see her parents, and they thought she would be happy to be home again. But they soon saw that she was sad, and she missed the colt and the wild horses. Each evening, as the sun went down, people would hear the stallion sadly neighing from the hilltop above the village, calling for her to come back. The days passed, and her parents knew that the girl was lonely. She became ill, and the doctors could do nothing to help her. They asked what would make her well again. "I love to run with the wild horses," she answered. "They are my relatives. If you let me go back to them, I shall be happy forevermore." Her parents loved her, and so they agreed that she should go back to live with the wild horses. They gave her a beautiful dress and the best horse in the village to ride. The spotted stallion led his wild horses down from the hills. The people gave them fine things to wear, colorful blankets and decorated saddles, and they painted designs on their bodies, and they tied eagle feathers and ribbons into their manes and their tails. In return, the girl gave the colt to her parents. Everyone was joyful. Once again, the girl rode beside the spotted stallion, and they were proud and happy together. But she did not forget her people. Each year she would come back, and she always brought her parents a colt. And then, one year, she did not return, and she was never seen again. But when the hunters next saw the wild horses, there galloped beside the mighty stallion a beautiful mare with a mane and tail floating like wispy clouds about her. They said the girl had surely become one of the wild horses at last. Today, we are still glad to remember that we have relatives among the horse people, and it gives us joy to see the wild horses running free. Our thoughts fly with them. The end. Thank you for reading and listening with us today. I'm going to attach another video about a different topic, so if you want to watch that one today, that would be great. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.